Welcome to Alcuin Study Center. I'm Dan Doherty, the Executive Director of Alcuin Study Center, and here we're joined with Todd Wenninger, the Operations Manager at Alcuin Study Center, and we are just thrilled to be able to interview Laura McConkey. She has her M.Lit from Judson University, pursuing a D.Lit, that is a doctorate in literacy, from Judson University in Elgin, Illinois, and teaches at Lincoln Elementary there, fifth grade. And we're just going to dive into some of what you've been working on, Laura, and talk some as well about how your faith informs what you do in the classroom and how you think about teaching. So why don't you tell us a little bit first about the program that you're in?
Well, I am in Judson's, the Doctorate of Literacy. It's a 4-year program because it's an embedded dissertation program, meaning that we're doing the dissertation piece by piece as we go through the 4 years. Instead of doing exams like some programs would do, we do benchmarks. This is an ed doctorate as opposed to a PhD, which means that the ed doctorate is more practical in nature. And that's what I found to be true of this program in particular. It's practical for teachers, for practitioners. This specific program is not designed for people who want to become superintendents, that kind of thing. It is really about improving teaching practice and associated practices, I guess, in all areas of literacy. So we focus on speaking and writing professionally and what they call beatristic. Is that the right word? It's been a while. I think it's beatristic. Writing, but writing for fun, writing for beauty. So like if I'm publishing a novel, a children's book, a book of poetry, that kind of writing. But then our benchmarks include things like giving a keynote address. The dissertation is one. I did co-teach in a Master's of Literacy class this spring. That's another benchmark. So just different kinds of experiences then that will make me not only better at my current job, but that open doors for me to write professionally, speak professionally, teach at the college level, those types of things, depending on what I desire to do. Fantastic.
What's your focus? Can you talk a little bit about your dissertation project and kind of the focus that you've taken?
Absolutely. And I actually, just so that you're aware, I do have some little note cards here to keep myself on task or on track. As you'll learn as I start talking about, my focus is personality research and how we can use that to better ourselves as educators and how to understand our students better, and even as a vehicle for building classroom community within our classrooms. But I am an intuitive perceiver, which means that I do not do things step by step with every duck in a row. So I did jot some things down to help keep it clearer for people who are sensing judgers who will be listening. But we'll kind of get into a little bit about what that means. I first got interested in personality and what it could mean for me and for education as a whole when I had to take a class to renew my middle school certification. And the professor had us take a couple of personality assessments, one of which was the Keirsey temperament sorter. And after taking that assessment, she asked the class, now everybody who is a guardian, which is one of his 4 personality types, raise your hand. And she looked around, yes, and everyone in the class raised their hands. And she said, most teachers are, and then she looked at me and I did not have my hand up. And she said, what are you? And I said, I'm an idealist champion. And she said, oh, yes, you are. Which is the first time I realized that most people in education, especially in elementary education, are of this similar personality type, a sensing, judging type. We'll talk about that, called the guardian. And just having that knowledge really equipped and empowered me to work better with my colleagues. Because for so many years, for over 20 years, I mean, I've been teaching now, I've been a teacher for 35 years. So for over 20 of those years, I was operating under this assumption that because I was working with other teachers, they would see things the way I see things. And that is really not the case. And so finding out that no, most teachers have a guardian personality type where I have an idealist personality type means that I do see things differently. And I even, in many cases, speak almost a different language. So that kind of got those thoughts going. I have taught in more different areas and arenas and ages than any other teacher I know, by far, just because of happenstance and interests and things. But most recently, I was teaching in the public school elementary music. And that's how I was able to really get back into the public school after years of teaching in the private realm. And after doing that for a couple of years, proving myself there, I was finally able to get back into the elementary classroom, which is my favorite. That's my wheelhouse. And I got a fourth grade classroom, and I was so excited about being back in a classroom that I spent my entire summer before planning what I wanted that classroom to look like and how could I make it exciting and fun and interesting. And through some prayer, I landed on a theme based on Rick Riordan's Lightning Thief and the Heroes of Olympus and that series. And I designed my room to look like Camp Half-Blood from that series. And if you're at all familiar, if you're not, read it. You need to read it, even as an adult. It's phenomenal for many reasons. But I set up my room like Camp Half-Blood, which meant that instead of a rug in the middle of my room, I had green AstroTurf. And I set my kids in groupings of 4 students each with a little, one of those little white rolling cabinets that has a file drawer at the bottom and then a couple of other drawers in the middle. And I actually got my husband to help me collect and poly 6 tree stumps that were set around on the edges of the AstroTurf, so that it resembled the cabins at Camp Half-Blood. Each cabin at Camp Half-Blood is designated for one of the Greek Olympians, one of the deities. And so I chose 6 who were appropriate for school. So no Aphrodite, no Hades. That would not, but Athena and Artemis and Hermes and Apollo and Demeter and Hephaestus. And then I set about giving my students some kind of personality assessment things. And based on those, I placed them into a cabin with other kids who were like them. So my Athena kids were kids who were detail-oriented, structured types of learners. My Apollo kids were the more artsy, free-flowing. My Hermes boys were my high energy, lots of ideas, always bouncing kinds of kids. So it was very fun. I thought they'll stay in these cabins for maybe the first half of the year. We'll see how it goes, but it'll be fun. Well, by the time we had our Valentine's Day party, the parents came in and they said, okay, we need the kids in 5 groups. Well, my kids were in 6. I had 6 cabins, and my kids immediately went, don't split us up, don't split up. My Hermes boys literally jumped up and grabbed each other and said, you can't split up Hermes. Like, well, okay. And then at the end of the year, we sat around and we had what we called a campfire on our stumps and our AstroTurf. And I asked the kids to just kind of reflect and reminisce on their year. And I had 10-year-old boys crying because they didn't want it to end. They didn't want to leave camp. And I thought, okay, something is going on here that is far more powerful than just a fun theme. Although I do think the theme has a big part of it. I encourage teachers to do that. Something else was happening. And so I dug a little bit deeper with the kids, and they were sharing with me things about bonding with people who they had known before but hadn't been great friends with, and now felt like they had a lifelong bond with them. learning how to work with people who were like them and who weren't like them, and how valuable they thought that was for them. Talking to some of them and their parents a few years later, one parent told me a story about her daughter. I think that was her daughter, in middle school, 7th grader, was getting gum out to have a piece of gum. And this boy comes running by and he's like, "Hey, can I have a piece?" She's like, "Well," he goes, "Come on, we're both Hephaestus." And she gave him a piece, you know? So recalling that from 3 years prior, just so something is going on here.
Yeah.
So now I have been teaching 5th grade for 4 years. I have a different theme in my room. Now I have guilds based on the colonial guild system, because I teach a lot of American history. And but I do the same thing. I've tailored, tweaked a little bit my system for putting kids into their guilds, into their groups. But still the idea is that they are with kids who are like them in personality. They create a flag, they create like a shield for themselves. They organize their little white cabinet in a way that works for them. And they're all different. And it's really fun to watch how that happens. I teach them not just about their own personality type, but through an activity we do called the Personality Compass, which I recommend to any organization and any teacher grade, probably 3rd grade and all the way up into college.
Personality Compass?
The Personality Compass, and I forgot, that's the book I forgot to grab. If you look it up on Amazon, you can find the original book. It's not expensive, it's a little book, but you can also find all kinds of resources online. A lot of businesses use this. Basically, it just divides people into 4 groups, north, south, east, west, based on how they tend to function in a group. So it's a much broader, more general kind of a thing. But I give the basic descriptions to the kids. They choose where they think they fit. And then with that group of people, they have to create a big poster that talks about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, who do you like working with, who do you hate working with, and why, what do you wish others knew about you. And it takes a couple hours to do, but it's well worth it, because the kids are doing all of that thinking on their own, and then they share with each other. And the reason that I bring this up now is to make clear that even though they are seated with people who are like them, when they are doing work, cooperative learning projects, that sort of thing in the classroom, they are deliberately mixed up. So they understand we need a north, because norths make sure that goals are met and things get done. We need a south, because the souths are the ones who make sure that everybody's voice is heard and everybody feels comfortable and happy with what the group is doing. We need an east, because they're the detail people. They're the ones who are going to make sure that what we do in the end looks good and it's edited and those types of things. And then we need the west, because the west are the ones who have all the great ideas. They're creative brainstormers, and they'll make sure that we have something that's unique and exciting and all of that. And the kids do refer to that throughout the year. I mean, from that initial 4th grade group to my 5th graders, they'll say when they're working in a group, "Oh, our south is gone today, so whatever," or we need our east to finish this project so it looks good.
I think our compass tends to point northwest.
Yeah.
Northwest.
Oh, yes.
From the way that you just described that.
I'm mainly north with a western tilt. Yes. But I'm just seeing how this is impacting the kids. And so my dissertation now, to get to that, because obviously I'm not a straight line thinker, as north as I am. My dissertation, the working title right now is an investigation of the use of personality typology to foster a positive classroom climate. And so I did obviously a lot of research over the past year. I've done a lot of research. And where I landed was with the personality typology theory that began with Carl Jung back in the early 1900s. And then was tweaked and made, I would say, more practical by Myers and Myers-Briggs, who are a mother-daughter team who created the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. That was further tweaked by David Keirsey, who created the Keirsey Temperament Sorter, which is where we get those labels of guardian, idealist, and then artisan and rational. But beginning with the Myers-Briggs, I think I went with them because of the foundation of research that supports the theory, going all the way back to Jung. And in fact, Jung drew on the ancient Greek ideas of, and I'll see if I remember them all, melancholy and sanguine and choleric and what's the fourth?
I don't know.
Sanguine, choleric.
Came to mind immediately for me too.
There's one more. It'll probably pop into my head randomly.
Phlegmatic.
Phlegmatic. Thank you. Yes. He really started by researching those and looking at people around him, and then developed first what he recognized was the attitude of extroversion and introversion, which we'll talk about. But there has also been a wealth of research done now over 100 years on Jung's theory, and then the validity and reliability of the MBTI, and then and moving now into Keirsey. So that's what I've chosen to continue using with my students and then in my research. So before I feel like I can talk about the research, I feel I need to give everybody just a quick rundown of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about personality typology.
Yeah,
because
please.
without that understanding, the rest that I say is not going to make sense. And what I do and what I found in the research, that's really, it has surprised even me and propelling me forward in different and deeper directions. Anyway, moving on. So personality typology, according to this theory, personality preferences are inborn, but they aren't a fixed identity like some people tend to think. For example, when I say I am an intuitive, that is not a box that labels me, that makes me like every other intuitive on the planet. That's not how it works. If you think about whether or not you're right or left-handed, it's a great analogy for this. If I walk up to my 3-year-old grandson, 4-year-old grandson, and put a crayon right in front of them, they're going to reach out and grab it with their dominant hand, right? Does that mean that they will never use the weaker hand for anything? No. Are there people you can think of who are right-handed, say, and they have barely any function with their left hand? Yes. My mother would be one of them. She really struggles. I'm a little better. I do my makeup and I shave my legs with alternate hands. And then we can think about people like a really great switch hitter, right? Who are almost ambidextrous. That's really more how personality preferences work. You are born with an innate preference. It's where you tend to go first. It's where you tend to go in times of stress. But we all over our lifetime develop those other areas as well to become more well-rounded people. And on those, in those categories, you can think of it like a sliding scale. So for example, when we get to, well, let's just use the handedness, we have people who are closer to the middle, right? Or may even be in the middle. They're ambidextrous. They're really able to use both pretty, with great facility.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we think about it that way, another way you can think about it is, if you told me that you have a preference for chocolate ice cream, I can predict then that in most situations, given a choice, you're going to choose chocolate. Does that mean that you never choose strawberry or vanilla? No. There are times and situations where I'm in the mood for strawberry today. Great. But most of the time, or more of the time, you're going to lean to chocolate. Okay. These preferences do continue to develop throughout life. Young identified, and Myers-Briggs identified 2 what they call attitudes and 2 functions. The attitudes we notice more clearly and more strongly earlier on. The functions we tend to notice, they tend to develop more later. But like I said, you're also, some of where you fall on that sliding scale may shift a little bit throughout life as well. You know, I may have started out 100% or 97% intuitive. But as I've gotten older, I use my sensing side a little more, that type of thing. So having the same personality type does not mean that you're an identical person. A lot of how we develop as people, of course, depends on our environment, our parents, our school experiences, where we grew up in the world, our cultural norms. All of that plays into who we are as individuals. So I have had students absolutely with the same 4-letter type as I have. One of them very much like me. I saw that coming. The other one, not so much. And yet we do still have similar preferences in certain areas. So that's just kind of that background. So when you look at a Myers-Briggs personality type, it's 4 letters. And as I said, the 2 of them, the first and the 4th, are attitudes. The middle 2 are functions. And as I said, we find ourselves kind of on that sliding scale in between. The first attitude, and it's the most obvious and first to develop, is extroversion versus introversion. There's been a lot of comment about this lately. My teaching partner last year came in and said, I'm an ambivert. Like, that's not actually a thing. What you mean is you're probably closer to the middle. But extroversion and introversion simply are designating where your focus tends to be. Where do you focus your attention, externally or more internally? And that also speaks to where you get your energy. Is that from outside factors or within yourself? So when we talk about an extrovert, extroverts think out loud. They prefer to work in teams. They like to be busy, doing, moving, acting. They want to be interacting with their external environment. Introverts tend to process things internally before they will speak. They prefer to work independently when given the choice. They value more the still and the quiet because they need that to process.
Yep.
So when we talk about school, and because I know that this presentation will hopefully be helping young teachers in training,
Sure.
Here's a quick way to think about that and also to understand it in your classroom. In school, your extroverts are your blurters. They love it when you give them a chance to turn and talk, or to talk in a group about something and not just listen to a lecture from a teacher. They're sharing their ideas. Me too. They are sharing their ideas as their ideas are forming. So the first thing that they say isn't necessarily where they land or what they truly believe. They're processing through their language. And I say that a lot. And it always reminds me of when my mother said to me one time, Laura, I think you just talk to hear yourself. And as an adult, I go, yes, that is exactly what I do. And it's valid and it's how I process. But as teachers, we tend to want to shut those kids down. I do it as well. You know, you need to know, we need to provide more opportunities for them to process verbally, because that's what they do. And that's how they learn, is in that way. On the flip side, our introverts tend to be quiet. My son was given a lower, what's the word I want? Participation. He was given a low participation grade in an English class. And it actually made me angry because he is introverted. All the extroverted kids, right? By the time Ethan had processed what the teacher was asking, all of his answers had been given. And it wasn't that he wasn't participating. He was participating very much mentally. It just wasn't all coming out of his mouth right away.
Right.
And so something that we need to do for them is give more exit tickets at the end, especially of a classroom discussion. Give an exit ticket to everybody. That's where that introvert can answer and give you all their thinking. And it's all very valid thinking, and it shows you they were participating. They just weren't participating in the discussion verbally.
Can you define an exit ticket?
Yes, I can. Thanks for asking. So an exit ticket would be just one or two quick questions that hit at the meat of whatever the discussion was, whatever the main topic was. I use them in math a lot. I use them, just as a quick, even after they've done all the different work they've done, they've worked in groups, they've done some things on their own, whatever. All right. Sometimes I give an exit ticket actually at the beginning of the next math period to see what they've retained.
Yeah.
What have they got? But after like a big history lesson, I'll just ask a couple quick questions. So what am I thinking? French and Indian War. I do that. We act it all out in like a 45-minute to an hour period. And it's quick and fast and fun, but then I have them sit down. All right. What was George Washington's role in the French and Indian War? Psst. He basically started it through a major error that is referred to in one of his major songs in Hamilton. He led his men straight into a massacre. Yeah. And it might be what was it? Who was fighting and over what? Because it wasn't the French versus the Indians, it was the British versus the French over the Ohio Valley. So those quick things, little things like that. So that works really well for those kids to be able to show. Something else I do is I pay a lot of attention when I give them group turn and talk time. I'm walking over to my groups who I know are more introverted and just listening in, because then they're forced to talk to each other, right? And then I can really hear some of the thoughts that are happening.
And they're all grouped together.
And they're grouped together.
So that there isn't an extrovert who's dominating the conversation, but
yes,
all processing at the same speed.
Great observation. Yes.
Yeah.
And they're comfortable because they're not going to be run over or interrupted.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very helpful. All right. So the second letter, so that's EI, extroversion, introversion. Your second letter is the first function, and that's an S or an N. Those stand for sensing and intuition. People who value sensing. Now here's another a misnomer or misunderstanding here is that people who are intuitive aren't using their senses. No, we all use our senses and we're all capable of making intuitive connections, right? But again, it's a preference for how we process information. So sensors are the ones who will, first of all, they like things that they can see, that they can note. They like data. They like hard facts. They like things that they can point out in their environment. And they like to notice details and then use those details to come to a conclusion or a theme. All right, think about a scientist gathering data, right? He's got this open-ended question. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm going to watch all these things. I'm going to take careful notes, everything I see, hear, smell, taste, whatever. And then I'm going to come to my conclusion. It's inductive reasoning. Yep. All right. The intuitives use more deductive reasoning. We go the other way. We get a sense of the big picture and then, or the theme, and then we hang our details underneath that. I picture, if you were to build a mobile for a child's room, your big idea, your theme is the hanger, and then the details are all the little pictures or toys that you're hanging off of that, right? So, example. In my 5th grade classroom, one of our major assignments for the year is something called a feature article. We begin it January as soon as they come back, and it is due the Friday before they leave for spring break. So it's a 3-month research project. When I am initially giving the directions, my sensors are the ones who are taking notes, maybe, who have their planner out, who are asking me to repeat, to clarify, every detail of my directions to the point that you can tell, it makes me like,
Right.
seriously, just get started.
Right.
All right. But then you have the intuitives. The intuitives immediately go to, ooh, who do I want to write about? What do I want to write about? What am I connected to? What am I passionate about? What am I going to be interested in?
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, okay, so now what do you want us to do? Could you
Right.
repeat all the directions?
Right.
You were sitting there looking at me,
Yep.
right? But if you can understand that, because the sensors want all the directions so they know what to follow, and then they'll come up with, right? They'll do their research and they'll come up with their big idea. But the intuitives, it has to be more personal. It has to be practical to us, personal to us. We have to have a big idea or theme that we can hang on to.
Yep.
Now I can understand your directions. I couldn't have processed the directions because I didn't have a practical place to hang them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, a
Yeah,
great.
no, that I've encountered in 12 years of teaching high school composition. That was
Yes.
that exact situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And both make me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm looking at it going, no. Write all the directions on the board. Hand them to the kids. Give them a detail. And then the intuitive kids can go do your thing, brainstorm away. Here are the directions when you're ready for them.
Yeah.
Right. And then the sensing kids aren't so nervous because I've handed it to them. It's all right here.
Right.
Right. You have it to follow.
That's good.
So yeah. All right. Now we get to the second function, which is your third letter. So that was either an S or an N, right? Sensing, intuition. All right. Now we've got thinking versus feeling. And again, thinkers do have feelings. Feeling people aren't all just wrapped up in emotions. We're capable of logic, right? Mm-hmm. It's both, but it is your preference for how you make decisions. And it's not even like, oh, I just emotionally, how do I feel? That's not what a feeler is. So thinkers, pretty straightforward. They tend to be detached, objective, logical. They are the information processors. They look at what has been presented to them. Boom, boom, boom. They are rooted in the present. What do I see in front of me? They like to prove themselves right. All right. A feeler makes decisions more based on their value systems and the effect that their decisions will have on people. And they tend to want to be right. They want things to be good. They want other people to validate that what they're doing is worthwhile and good. So when I think about this in school, I think about giving writing feedback. One of the things that we're told to do is to give very specific, detailed feedback. You're not supposed to tell a student, oh, you're writing, you're so good. You're a good writer. You're right. That looks great. We're supposed to give them specific. And we are. Both types need that. But it is even more important for the thinker that you are giving them very specific comments on things that they can point to. Here, look at this sentence. You did that well. That punctuation is effective. The feeler still needs you to say you liked it. I can give all the specific feedback I want, but when I have a really high achieving, like a gifted feeler, and I'm picturing one of my former students in mind, she would still slump and tear up if I didn't tell her that her writing was great and I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. You know, she needed both. So another illustration of this is how my best friend and I, she was also a teacher. We were just talking about this yesterday, how we approach a child who is hurt. She's a thinker. She goes straight into her thinking brain. Her father was a doctor, and she goes, I turn into my doctor and my father, the doctor. I get almost cold. I'm detached. I'm analytic. This is the injury. This is what has to happen. This is how I take care of it. I stay very calm and cool. And I'm more of a feeler. I also stay calm and cool. But my approach to the problem is where I would normally maybe get nauseated by the blood or the whatever. I don't, because my focus is all on the child. and making that child feel safe and cared for. And in the process of that, I will also take care of all those physical needs. So the result is the same. It's just we take a little different route to get where we get.
It's a little bit like that video about the nail. Do you know that one?
Hear that one? I don't think I do.
The husband and wife in this case, but the wife is complaining. You don't see her from the front right away, and she says, I don't understand it. I have this like throbbing pain, and then as the camera comes around, she's got a nail sticking out of her head. And have you seen it?
No, but
the husband's like, well, you do have don't even go there. She says, yeah, man. And then she's like, but I just feel like my sweaters are all getting snagged. And she's going, and he's like, maybe it's, and then yeah, it's hilarious, but it's kind of problem solving versus and then he finally says, empathy. That must be really hard. And she's like, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. It reminds me, there's well, now kids will think it's older movie, inappropriate movie called White Men Can't Jump. Didn't like the movie at all, but there's a phenomenal scene, husband and wife in bed. And she says, I'm thirsty. And he's like, okay, so you want me to get you a drink of water? Don't try to solve my problem. I want you to understand that I'm thirsty. And they have this whole thing. And so there's even a shorthand now with my husband and I, where I can just be like, honey, I'm thirsty. And he knows that means just sit and listen and empathize. Don't try to solve the problem right now. First, I need your presence.
Yeah.
So, all right. Last letter pair. Okay, here we go, which is the last.
Maybe you're getting here, but I am also interested in a little clearer definition or distinction between function and attitude. Is that the other one?
It's complicated. It's I'm still digging into it.
Okay.
But the attitudes are more visible by externally.
Okay.
So it's easier for you to look at somebody and go, oh yeah, you're totally extroverted, introvert. Yeah. That's pretty easy to see. The functions are more internal. How does your brain process something? So you can get to the same result as somebody else, but it's how you got there. That's more internal.
Okay.
So without getting too, and this last one as well, I'm going to keep this last one kind of simple because this last one, I'm just wrapping my head around learning about this. I'm finishing up the training to be certified to give the MTIC, the Murphy-Meisgeier type indicator for children, which is the children's version of the MBTI. And so I'm learning in depth more about these things. And this last one is somewhat tied and built upon those 4 functions in the middle, but it's what they look like then, what they result in kind of.
Okay.
So that final one, number 4, is judging versus perceiving. And I hate that they use the word judging. I wish they would have used the word ordering or something, because it would make more sense. We think of judging as, oh, they're judgmental. And that's not what it's talking about really at all.
Right.
So you can think of this as how we prefer to order our life or our environment. And it has a lot to do with our attitude about closure. So a judger, a J, has an external order. And you're going to, right now, you're going to go, oh, function. I know people like this. They like systems. Every duck is in a row. Their desk is neat in my classroom and organized. They like planners, and they are planners. My daughter is a J. We could not go on vacation spontaneously when she was a child. My husband and I are both P's. We like spontaneity. She had to be told, this is what we're going to do. She does not like surprises, right? She likes order. Perceivers, opposite. We have an internal order. I think about a teacher friend I worked with who had piles of stuff everywhere. She's like hyper perceiver. And if you made her clean it up, she would lose things. She'd say, I know which pile it's in. She had her order. We prefer things to be open-ended. We like to be spontaneous. We like to defer closure. We like to defer making a final judgment as long as possible. So what does that look like? Well, feature article. I'm going to go back to that because it's a great picture of this. I give the kids a syllabus. It's the first time they ever get anything like that in 5th grade. But a big part of that assignment is for them to learn, how they work best, so that they're more prepared for middle school and high school and college or whatever. But I give them this syllabus with dates. The judgers hate the date deadline. It stresses them out because they're always feeling like they're up against it. Perceivers love the deadline. We want to know how much time I have, and then I'm going to go backwards, right? Well, it's going to take me about this long to read that book, and it's going to take me about this long to write a summary. So if I start that project on Saturday, I can turn it in Monday morning. Got it. That's how we work. So my J's.
I would have thought the J's would want the deadline.
They like the step-by-step, but deadlines make them anxious. Just having that date in front of them can make them anxious. And when I would talk to my kids in the classroom and I would repeat, okay, remember, this is due then, this is due then, I can see it on their faces. They're like, where the perceivers are like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I got it, okay. You know, it's just a whole different attitude. So the people with a judging preference want to start early. They find, how many resources do I need? I need 3. Okay, boom, boom, boom. I find them. I do my writing. I do my outline. I do my writing. I do my editing. I am now done. Revision? No, it's done. Okay. The perceivers, like I said, we start backwards, right? We're the kids who start the project on, Sunday because it's due Monday morning.
Right.
And I was talking to Dan and my sister about this, and she went, oh no, like you have to teach them better. I said, no, listen, hold on, we don't, because perceivers are it takes them so long to process, to continue taking in information. They will find way more sources than the judges will. I find it working on my dissertation. They had to tell me. I said, I need you to tell me that I have permission to stop. I need you to tell me that I have enough sources, because otherwise I'm going to keep going until I have found everything that could possibly be out there. And that's not realistic. So we find all of that. And as we're doing that, we're actually formulating a lot in our brains. So then when we sit down to write, it's there. We can do it pretty quickly, and we are much more willing to revise because life is a work in progress, right? That's what we do. We're constantly revising. We're okay with the open-endedness. So one of my students this year, obviously a perceiver, messy desk, whole thing, very bright, especially in advanced classes in language arts and all of that, and literacy. And a couple days before the feature article was due.
Oh, you froze on us there, Laura. We're gonna give it a minute here. You're frozen.
Feature article.
Oh, you were frozen for a little bit there.
Okay.
So go back to kind of the beginning of that.
Okay. So this student.
Yeah.
Working on the feature article, and she was out 2 days before it was due. And I thought to myself, she's not sick. She came back in apologetic, but with a beautifully crafted feature article, absolutely the quality I expected from her. And she told me, yeah, I worked all day on it. She got up early. She worked that entire day. And so when I talked to her parents about some of that later, I said, yes, we want to help her learn to plan a little better, but you also need to be really proud of her. She knows how she works. She knew what she needed to do, and she did it. She didn't blow it off. That's different. This isn't a lazy kid. This is a kid who works best when she's working to a deadline and she can just sit and pound. And that's how I work. I get it. And that is actually how perceivers work better. If you try to make them do it little by little, the way a judger does, you will not get the same quality project from them because you're shut down that creative mind before they've gotten to what is their best idea. So we need to do that. So the whole syllabus thing works really well for both. We do it in chunks, but it's just the way that I approach it with them. And understanding that as an adult, I have a way better idea now of how much time things are going to take me than children do. So we do need to teach them how to do that and do it realistically. So yes, go.
I have a couple of questions, Laura. Okay. The first of which is when are our exit tickets coming?
I should. I will create an exit ticket for you to hand out.
Great. That
when
would be
you
great.
give that.
I find myself wondering, is there, so you mentioned at the beginning kind of your draw to this stage. I think you said this is your favorite, elementary, 4th and 5th grade. Is there an age or stage at which, we ideally start to explore some of these things? And then kind of as a follow-up, like what are the implications, or paint us a picture of not having this information and not pursuing education with this in mind, these design things?
Yes, and that's really where the research comes in. First of all, the Murphy-Meisgeier assessment is for 2nd graders, so like 7-year-olds through 18-year-olds, okay. the youth version of this. Of course, then there's some overlap with the adult, the MBTI. I taught kindergarten for a couple of years. I did not do personality tests. I did put my kids in groups, though, that they stayed in all year. And I still saw the benefit of that, which was really interesting. In my research, I'm going to be focused on teachers of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade right now. There's certainly a way, and it's something that I'm starting to think more about how to bring this in for middle school and even into high school. But just as a teacher, even if you don't bring in my system or any of that, just understanding personality type in your kids is, I can't overstate how important this is becoming, or has become, or just is. Personality mismatch can cause major issues between a teacher and a student. When we realize that the vast majority of people in education are guardians, which is a sensing, judging, focused personality type, we recognize that they value intuitives. It's kind of funny to me, actually. There is a higher percentage of intuitive types in gifted programs. And because I do have, I have my gifted specialist certification as well. I know exactly why, because all of those sensor judger people are super impressed when a child can make intuitive inferences. And so they see that as higher intelligence. It's really, it might be, but it's also just how their brain works. But the kids who are sensor perceivers, the artisans, represent 90% of high school dropouts in the United States. Guardian types, SJs, are the most likely to favor their own personality type. In idealists, well, first rationals. Rationals are the intuitive judgers, intuitive thinkers. Intuitive thinkers. They can tend to prefer their own type a little more as well. It doesn't seem to be as strongly as the guardians. The artisan.
The ones that are NTs, what are those called?
Rational. So I made some slides for you guys, but I'll just kind of give you a visual. If you think about this, guardian, think George Washington. So we'll just kind of go into that right now real quick, and then I'll come back around to your question because it'll make more sense. So guardians, sensor judgers, they're factual, cautious, dependable, law-abiding, detailed. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way the authority tells us to do it. Therefore, we should. Okay, most teachers, elementary especially. All
That's
right.
why I got into trouble all the time. And
Yes, it is. It is. So think George Washington, think Mother Teresa. Those are our guardians. Okay. Artisan, and they represent about 46% of the population. Then we have the artisans. They also represent 46, 48% of the population. Those are sensor perceivers. Think of artists and a lot of tradesmen. So I think Barbara Streisand, Gordon Ramsay, artisans. They're daring, they're adaptable, they're impulsive, they're optimistic, they're hands-on. My husband is an artisan. He's a carpenter. He can MacGyver stuff like nobody's business. Artisan, okay? And they represent, that's the group of people who end up a lot of artists. Visual artists, theater, a lot of actors, singers, that type of thing. But also if you think about like carpenters, people who work with their hands, people who learn best with their hands tend to be artisans. The idealists then represent the other two, idealists and rationals. Idealists are about 15%-ish of the population. They are intuitive feelers. So they are very imaginative. They're very authentic. It's really, really important to idealists that they are their authentic selves and that they are presenting their authentic selves. It's kind of a byword. Very relational, idealistic, visionary. And think about Gandhi, Princess Diana, idealists. And then we have the rationals. Those are the intuitive thinkers. So they're ingenious, curious, strategic, logical, independent. That's my sister Jane we're talking about. She is literally a rocket scientist. Think about Albert Einstein. Think about Margaret Thatcher. Right? But there's this incredible, this curiosity and creativity in there, but they're thinkers. So it's very logical and well ordered at the same time. So now if we think about those four types, we've got our guardians, our George Washingtons, right? We do it this way because that's the way we do it. That's the way that everybody is safe and well cared for. All right. And now we have our artisans. Do we want to do this? I'm not sure. Do we? Well, what does it have to do with me? Can I do this with my hand? Could I just draw that instead? Could I build a project instead of having to write? Those are the kids who drop out. And you think about why. And artisan teachers, there are very, very few. I have one in my doctoral cohort. And I said, oh, bless you for being there. They actually tend to disfavor students of their own type. So no one is favoring those artisans.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's what I learned over this past year doing the research that really, really hit me. And I thought, okay, this started out being a fun way to order my classroom. It became about, it builds great community in the classroom and it helps kids work in teams and learn to work with other people and appreciate their differences and other people's differences, right? And now I'm looking at it going, this is critical and teachers need this information. And schools need this information. One researcher said he felt that the major shift that has to happen in education is personality studies, and that education will not experience the overhaul that it really desperately needs until the guardians are no longer in charge. Not because there's anything wrong with being a guardian. We know this. I mean, our military, our police, our people who keep us safe and well-ordered and all of that are guardians. I value my guardian cohorts because they're the ones who can tell me what the staff meeting is about and what I need to bring today. Or remember that, oh yeah, you do actually have to order transportation for that field trip. Oh yeah, I do. Right. I value them tremendously. My best friend is a guardian. I very much value that perspective. But because they tend to be, this is the way we've always done it, people, and they're afraid to buck the system. They don't like to buck authority. Change doesn't happen when they're in charge. So the importance of it is we need teachers at all levels to recognize and value all those types so that all of those types have a place in their classrooms and are validated and are trained up in the way. I was thinking about speaking today. This popped into my head. Train a child up according to his bent, right? Because when they're old, they won't depart from it. And one of the things I'm learning about children and the MBTI is that when a child's natural tendency is pushed down, it does affect how they grow and change, which it's not a bad thing to develop your weaker part. But if that dominant one is pushed down, it really affects, and I can say because I know that this happened to me, not because anybody meant to hurt me, but because I was raised by a guardian mother with guardian teachers, right? Feeling as my way of processing was not always validated. And the intuitive way of coming to conclusions and doing things, even in my dissertation process, they kept telling me, you have to stop thinking going into this with a foregone conclusion of what you're going to find. And I'm like, but that's how my brain works. I have to. That's what I'm doing. I'm still open to all the possibilities. Don't get me wrong, I can change, but I have to go into this with a direction in mind, or I'm lost. And I struggled a lot with that process.
Yeah.
But it really speaks into then kids' confidence in who they are.
Yeah.
And even their ability then to function at their best and their most effective. Because, it's like somebody tied your right hand behind your back and you're being forced to use your left for the rest of your life. Can you do it? Yeah, you can do it. Are you ever going to be as effective or as confident as you would have been if you'd been allowed to use your right?
Right.
No. And we need all types in the world.
Yeah.
So I think education needs to shift to reflect that and to support that. So
that's good, man. This sounds like really good work.
Yeah, so much so.
Well, good. I'm glad I was able to get it across in my intuitive, perceptive way, so that it's
very good.
Clear
I've taken the Myers. You have me wondering what I really am, actually. So I have some ideas of what it is. We don't need to go into that right now.
Yeah.
No. But I'm going to go back and I think take the Myers-Briggs again. I've taken it before.
Because you took that one with me not long ago, and I jotted down. Oh yeah, there you are. At that time, you were ENTP.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah. When I read the definition.
Yeah.
This is an
interesting though, because Jane and I, not to get into our family stuff too much, but if Jane and I are the same, that's really strange to me.
You're not. No, you're not. She's INTJ.
Oh, okay.
Intuitive.
So the NT the rationalist is just the NT, right.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's a whole.
Right. You've only
there's reasons why they're grouped the way that they're grouped that.
Yep.
I'm not even going to go into. It makes sense.
Okay. What book were you going to recommend?
This book, I love this one. This is Please Understand Me. This is Kiersey, David Kiersey. Are you seeing it forward or am I? Or are you seeing it backward?
I'm seeing it forward.
You are seeing it forward.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm seeing it backward. David Kiersey. And this gets into some of the Myers-Briggs in the beginning because that's what he based it on. But then at the back of the book, he talks about each personality type. And I mean, that was where I read mine and I learned things about me that I thought something that I do inside of my head that I thought was either very unique to me and or even kind of a sin thing, whatever. And I read that and I went, oh, that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
And I talked to my daughter, my guardian daughter, and I said that. She goes, oh yeah, you totally do that, Mom. You totally do that. But it's really helped because then I can bring a situation to her and say, are you, yeah, you're doing it. Don't, we're super, I'm ENFP. I'm the idealist champion, and we're super perceptive, which is valid. But then inside of our heads, we tend to take those perceptions and assign motives to them that are not always accurate. And so then we jump to a conclusion like, oh, she hates me because she looked at me sideways, instead of stopping, going, no, maybe she has an upset stomach.
Right.
Maybe, right. It has nothing to do with you. Everything isn't about you.
Yeah.
So I found it really, really helpful. But there are a couple of others that since we're there, I did bring a couple of others. This is kind of the seminal work if you really want to understand MBTI.
And tiger stripes.
Yep. And the website that has developed from this, which is where I'm doing my training on administering the test, is called peoplestripes.org. But this is Gordon Lawrence. He did a lot of research using the MBTI, and then he talks more about kind of practical uses of it and how we can build weakness from strengths and that type of thing. The other one I would say is this one for teachers. And I'll put this in the notes, Dan, that I send you.
Okay.
Great minds don't think alike. All 16 types are great minds. They're all capable of doing different things and processing different ways. And this is specifically for education. So this one, and I have another one too that I like, but not as well as this one. I would start with this one. This actually, for example, strategies used for problem solving by type preferences. Extroverts want to talk about the problem, want to verbalize ideas, thoughts, and feelings, need time to discuss the situation, may suggest several ways to resolve the problem. And then they talk about introverts. What do introverts need? They need time to reflect and think about the problem. They may prefer to put feelings, ideas, and suggestions in writing rather than talk about them, may initially refuse to discuss the problem, right? And then they talk about sensors. What do they need? Intuitives. What do they need? And when I looked at this one is the one that even talks about how we prefer to assess. And it was fascinating to me because SJs, guardians, love exit tickets and quizzes, and they do them all the time because they love data, right? They're sensing, they want to see proof of where kids are. And my grade level partner, she gives every stinking quiz in the math curriculum. And I'm like, why are you wasting all your teaching time with quizzes? And intuitives, people like me, the idealists, we like to act things out. We bring improvisation stuff in. We bring readers theater in.
Right.
We act, we act out the French and Indian War in an hour. And I do a lot of physical. I do a lot of total physical. So we do the Road to the Revolution is the French and Indian War between the French and the British for land in the Ohio Valley. We go through the whole thing until we get to the revolution.
Wow.
But both are valid.
Yeah.
Both are valid. So it's not about what do I prefer and what do you prefer? It's who is in my class and what do they need?
Yeah.
So
it's good that, and it's good for, we have a different setting here, but we're still an educational institution. And so in thinking through those things, it's also interesting. I'm sure that Todd's thinking about this as well, but we land, I think, pretty well opposite on everything.
Just
Is it,
great.
Exactly.
I think exactly opposite. So
Yeah.
we are,
Our
yeah. So
building
actually,
coach
I was
is
thinking
my
when I said
exact
before that he was north, I actually thought more about, he's probably more east, actually.
As far as the
The
east is
detail.
from the west.
Yeah, we are about as far as the east is from the west. So that's
And that's
fun.
awesome. What I love about that, our coach, our building coach is the opposite of me. And initially it was tough. Some
Mhm.
things happened in data meetings that just offended me
Mm.
terribly that she did. And she clearly did not understand or trust me because as a feeling intuitive, she's like, where's your data? You need to, right? You're pulling this out of nowhere. And I can go, but I walk into the data meeting and say, this is where this child is and this is what he needs. Now go through all of your data and where are you going to land? This is who this child is and this is what he needs.
Right.
And I can't tell you exactly how I came to that conclusion. I just know it. One of my favorite faith expressions is I know it in my knower.
Right.
I just do, but I can't recall all the details that got me to that conclusion. They're there.
Yeah.
It's why, I mean, Dan knows I hate discussing stuff with him because I don't remember details, but I know why. I know that I believe what I believe, and I know that there's rationale behind it. It's
Right.
just, as an intuitive, I've gone right to the big picture and I discard all the details. I don't need them anymore. I know what my value is, right? So, but that's amazing. I think when you can find people like that, my best friend and I are both extroverts, and otherwise we're the opposites. And we directed children's theater together, and it was phenomenal the way that we filled each other's gaps. It just, it's why it works so well. And I always want to direct with her because she's brilliant as a director, but she's more organized. She's more strategy, whatever. She loves working with me because when we get down to the last couple days, she's burnt. She's done. She has no more patience for anybody. And I'm kicking into gear like going, yes, all right, you guys, we're almost there, you know, because that's the cheerleader kicks in them. And so I let her go. You go be in the corner and get the playbill put together and let me cheerlead the kids. It's all good.
So, as we're talking here, it strikes me, obviously part of our discussion, as you and I spoke earlier, that we want to get into as well. How does your faith, how do your Christian convictions shape and guide the way that you teach, the way you think about teaching? And even here, it strikes me that the idea that well, it's all over, but Paul specifically in the New Testament states that we've all been made differently, right? We all have different gifts, and we're all part of one body.
Yes.
And it seems like a lot of the work you're doing reinforces that idea that that the differences aren't something. I can look at my son, one of my sons who is has particular personality, what I would say are personality quirks, when really they're just personality differences from mine. And so and have a difficult time. And I know Todd's talked similar ways as far as we talk about parenting and how the personality pieces we can tend to value certain ones, and as well as with students, with coworkers, all of that. And so learning to listen and understand and better appreciate how each of us is made, recognizing that while we're all the Imago Dei, while every human being is made in the image of God, at the same time, it strikes me when what is it, Genesis 1:26, he says male and female, the image of God. And so it's not that one of them's the image of God and the other one's the image of God, but it's together they're the image of God, and that's the beginning of the human race. And so what is it, that all of these types together are a more full image, while each of us is the image of God. On the other hand, there's a more full image of God.
Yes, I absolutely. And there are so many thoughts pinging, but One, because I don't want to forget it, is that I found fascinating in doing the study that I'm doing now. At the book, I had to read a book called The Developing Child,
Okay.
which I'm looking through, who am I? Elizabeth Murphy wrote it. It's actually part of the materials that I've had to study to prepare me to give that assessment. But Elizabeth Murphy's The Developing Child, it's wonderful because she looks at all of those, each of the functions or attitudes, and then talks about it from a teaching perspective and a parenting perspective. So great book. I'm going to share it with both of my kids. Because, for example, one thing that they say is if you are introverted parents, or even if you're not, and you have an extroverted child, when that child is angry, frustrated, whatever, they're going to raise their voice, right? And as parents, our immediate is, you may not speak to me that way. You may not raise your voice. You may not, blah, blah, blah. That's disrespectful. And what Murphy is saying is actually, there is a fine line between being loud because I'm an extrovert and being disrespectful.
Yeah.
And you need to allow that extrovert to, they have to get it out. And you can say to them, you may not use that tone, or I need you to, go punch a pillow or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can also sit back and recognize that the first thing the extrovert says is probably born out of the emotion of the moment and is not what they actually mean. They're the ones who are like, hey, do you really? No.
Right.
Just sit back and be quiet. I hear you saying you're really angry with me right now.
Yeah.
And very often the extrovert will work themselves around to solving their own problem if you allow them to talk. Right. So just all of that I think is so key. But then in terms of scripture and all of that, I have always felt like my number one goal and calling and philosophy and education was really simple for me to find. Other people would kind of struggle with, well, I want kids to learn whatever. Mine has always been, I want to pull the gold out of every child that even he or she may not know is there. That's what I want to do. That's my job. Well, when I read about being an idealist champion, that's what idealist champions do. So I went, oh, that's where that's coming from. I also look at scripture in a really interesting way, because when I read the description of my personality type, the optimism and that desire to pull the best out of others and all that, my favorite guiding scripture verse is Romans. I'm just wondering if you're even going to guess it. You guess it. 8:28.
Yeah, that's okay.
All things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose.
Yeah.
Faith of a child, not hard for me at all. What's the problem? But I understand that's partly because I am ENFP. That is partly because my natural bent is to be faithful, optimistic, open to whatever happens and trusting God. It'll work out all right. Because ENFPs think that way. It'll work out, and that's helped me to grow as a believer, to say to myself, okay, that's not something that I shouldn't anyway, but that's certainly not something I should ever pride myself in or feel like, oh, I'm more spiritual because I have the faith of a child. No, you have faith of a child in part just because that's how God made you.
Right.
You need to work on the discipline side. My best friend, who is a spirit-filled, incredibly faith-filled Catholic, who it's all about the discipline and the study and all of that. And I don't have those pieces. So, she appreciates my enthusiasm and that faith piece, that optimism that I bring her. I'm going to pray for this. It's all going to be good. God's got it. You're good. I appreciate when she can challenge me by saying, where do you need to draw a line? And maybe this happening to you or this happening to your husband is a really good opportunity for you to grow in some spiritual discipline. Yes, it is. but I like what you're saying about that. We're halves of a whole, right?
Right.
And so if we think about those 16 that form that perfect square, I would love to dig into that at some point with the whole, numbers in scripture and everything. But we're the body of Christ. And when we train up a child according to his bent, and we reinforce that, we celebrate that, they're going to grow in confidence. And remembering that the one that really hit me this last year because of one of my profs, but that before you formed me in the womb, right before I formed you in the womb, I knew you.
Yeah.
And this prof said to me, it's God had your purpose, and then he created you for that purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
So he created me as an ENFP to do what he has called me to do. And if that is all put down to the point that I can't confidently be who I'm supposed to be, what happens then to my God-given purpose? Will I ever really fulfill that God-given purpose? And what are we doing to kids if we're shutting that down? And it doesn't mean that every artisan has to get straight A's and go to college. That's not it.
Right.
But they need to be able to be successful learning. They need to be validated as people and intelligent people.
Yeah. And education is it's not a data dump. It's not right. It's not teaching knowledge. Children aren't receptacles. It's a formation of the human being for their flourishing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I love that, for their flourishing.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put that. Yes. Which is why I spend as much time in my classroom on, we do 3 months of feature articles so that they learn how they work best. That is more important to me in that project than the finished product. The finished product, yes, they're learning how to write informational text. They're learning how to read informational text. They're learning how to be effective researchers and how to put things together in a way that is organized and pleasing and purposeful. There are lots of skills in there, but the reason that I will not cut that short in any way is because I want them to have that 3-month project. So they feel like when they go into middle school, they know how to attack a project, and they've learned something about themselves and how they work and how they function best, because they need that for life. And that's, to me, education should be preparing kids for life, whatever that ends up looking like for them. Everybody isn't going to be an engineer or a librarian, or right. It's not all about math and reading and right.
Is there there's a story, I think it was R.C. Sproul maybe, who I might be wrong on that, but I think that's who it was, who was looking at schools for his children when they were younger. And there's this new, I don't know, it was a private school or a charter school, but kind of a thinking in some different ways about education, and went and visited. And the principal or the head of school there talked about all of these, cutting edge technologies and cutting edge ways of education, and all of these and test scores and all of these things. And he said this parent, whoever it was, said, so everybody at the end was, he said, just applauding and so excited. And this was such a great big pep talk, and everyone's ready to sign on the dotted line, sign up their kids. And he said, this all sounds really impressive in many ways. But I have a question for you. What kind of, how do you put it? What kind of child are you hoping to produce? And the principal said,
That's great.
I haven't really thought of that. And Sproul, and Sproul said,
he just wasn't conscious.
Well, Sproul said, frankly, sir, that terrifies me. So this, we can give kids all kinds of tools for knowing this or that, or for getting a good job or whatever. But what
Right.
would you say in the goal of education? So if we've already stated flourishing is, but that's a very general. That's maybe very general in one sense. What would you say? What kind of child are you hoping leaves your classroom, or as a school system, what kind of
Right.
human being,
Right.
what's the goal of education? What does that flourishing look like?
Yeah. I think it's a really big question. It's a great question. I
Right.
don't know that I can answer it fully at the moment because I would have to, and I will. That's why I'm taking a couple notes here, like process some of that some more.
Yeah.
I think for myself, and especially within what we've been talking about, my goal when the kids leave my room is that they know who they are.
Mhm.
And that includes being able to articulate confidently their strengths and their struggles, their weaker areas, and being okay with both of those,
Mhm.
so that they can step confidently out into the world, into their whatever their purpose should be, and be able to work with other people, whether that's in a friendship relationship, a work relationship, whatever, but respecting other people
Mm.
and who other people are, and knowing what other people have to bring to the table. Like, for me, knowing I need somebody, if I'm going to run a theater camp, I need somebody who is more organized or who is better at certain things, because I'm not. And that's okay.
Right.
I talk to my kids about how I struggled. I'm very frank about, I struggled with math when I was young. I struggled with math. That is a weaker area for me. Has it gotten better? Yes, because I've worked through it. And that's that whole growth mindset piece.
Mhm.
But I can continue to grow and get better. I'm not stuck not
Right.
being good at math. That's not reality. Is it my favorite thing? Is it my preferred thing to do, or my preferred language? No, it's not.
Mhm.
Literacy is history and reading and writing and all of that. But I can grow in that way and be confident enough as a human being to stand here in front of you and say, I'm still going to be a phenomenal teacher for you,
Mhm.
even though I struggled at math, and in part because I struggled at math.
Sure. That's great. And that message right there is huge. Yeah, that those struggles don't, when we confront them, they actually grow us into a more mature, and raise us and others around us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. It's good.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Their struggle is a good thing.
yeah. Yeah. Boy, I have about probably 10 other questions that I want to ask, but knowing that our time is, we're already about at the hour and a half mark at this point.
Yes.
And so
Practically, yes.
yeah. So I wonder, though, if you'd be willing to have another interview at some point, or have another discussion with us. Just, I don't know if interview is the right word, another conversation with us. And continue to dig into questions of even, are there ways that our current, so I'm asking it, you can just choose if you want to answer now or table it, maybe, or maybe a brief answer, and then but the way that our current cultural and political climate affects the education of the system, or the way that the parameters that are put on educators, and does that limit the ability for students to really understand who they are, and or B, confront struggles and weaknesses in ways that will help them to flourish, or are those, it seems as though in many cases, at least in we see it more at the higher education levels, that the idea of feeling uncomfortable with who you are is a big taboo. Like you shouldn't be asking questions that make people feel uncomfortable with who they are, right? You shouldn't just whatever and so just wondering how how that plays out in the elementary school level or in levels that you've seen?
I do think that's a way bigger conversation,
Okay.
to really get into that.
Yeah.
And the ramifications of that.
Yeah.
I would say there are, just in a briefly kind of overview, there are some things that are happening right now that I'm loving in terms of that valuing other people's culture and experience.
Right.
So that when kids come into school, recognizing that, for example, most learning assessments, both like nationally normed, state normed, as well as in individual classrooms and programs, are very white middle class driven.
Yep.
And so there is a reason that kids of color, especially a lot of like Latina kids, are very underrepresented in gifted programs, not because they shouldn't be there, but because the tests they're based on experiences of a white middle class child. And so, my kids are much better able to answer questions than kids who come from a different cultural background.
Right.
And that's wrong.
Right.
The understanding now that we have to, when we're talking about culturally relevant education, it's what one of my colleagues is doing his dissertation on. We're just talking about being aware that we don't just teach Black history in February by celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. That's not what it's about.
Right.
And that, when I teach Jamestown, I teach the first arrival of slaves on this continent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, Hurricane Katrina, even worse, right?
Yes, because it's systemic and intentional.
It is systemic and intentional, and we can't blind ourselves to that.
Right.
At the same time, of course, we have the whole the gender sexual orientation piece that to me is actually, in my personal view, is actually doing the opposite of what it's claiming to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is coming all the way down into into elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big piece there.
Mm-hmm.
Are we accepting kids by telling them that they might be gay, or are we accepting that a boy may have more effeminate mannerisms and he's still a boy?
Right.
And it doesn't mean he is gay. We have to wrestle with all of that.
Right.
And how do we represent that in our classrooms and all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The short answer for me is that, again, ENFP, I guess, I trust God. But I trust God. I know that if this is what he created me for, he is bringing me the students I am supposed to have every year. And he has. And there have been years when I thought, I'm getting that class. And I go, no, it's okay. And some of those kids who were the kids are still some of my favorite kids. Because I was able to do something with them and for them and through prayer over them every day, all year. God was able to work as well. So I trust him. And so I trust him for that as well. What's in my library and what I teach and how I use my words and all of that is, yes, I have to be respectful and I have to be careful. I can't go around just yelling out whatever I think. Right. But at the same time, I have to be my authentic self. And that is, being a woman of God. I am a Christian and those beliefs are biblical and they're not going to change. And I need to be true to that in everything I do. So, but I trust God also and a lot of prayer to help me walk that line.
Yeah.
And so far, if the time comes I can't, then, I quit or I'm fired and God will take care of that too.
Right. Well, that's beautiful, Laura.
Really good.
Really, really grateful that you're doing what you're doing. And I've told you that before, but I just think you are so good at what you do. And I've seen that over the years and really grateful, praying that you do get the opportunity to teach teachers, that becomes a part of your, of the role that you have, because I think you have a lot to give. So thanks for this time. And
yeah, thank you, Laura. As many reasons as we have to lament some of the things happening in public education, this has been a huge encouragement. And I think I've heard a lot of this as a parent. I think of how fortunate the children and families are that are in your classes. This has been really good.
Good. Thank you. Well, that's what I wanted, for it to be an encouragement, and hopefully an encouragement to new teachers coming up, or whoever's watching. And yes, and I'm available, and I will send you I'll send you an exit ticket.
yeah, please do.
But I'll send you some of this and some of the diagrams that are written as well, because I think then it'll be way easier for people to follow it. They have something they can look at and note take on or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Great. And look forward to a second conversation sometime in the future.
Yes, I would love that.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.